and welcome to the Around the Table podcast
with Pastors Matt Smith and Nick Decker.
This podcast is all about the ministry and preaching of Lebanon Baptist Church in Greensboro, North Carolina. The goal is to help you grow in your faith and spiritual walk with the Lord every single day of your life.
To learn more about Lebanon Baptist Church,
visit lbcnow.org.
And now your hosts, Matt Smith and Nick Decker.
Hey, and welcome to the Around the Table podcast, where it is our goal on this podcast to help you grow in your faith and walk with the Lord every single day of the week. Today, we're joined with our co-host, Nick Decker, our family ministries and outreach pastor here. I am Matt Smith, the lead pastor at Lebanon Baptist Church, and we are also joined by a special guest today, one of our married couples life group leaders, Luke Adams. Good to have you on, Luke.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thank you guys for having me on. Real big fan of the podcast.
Thanks.
That's good to hear.
We heard you've listened to one of them.
At least one.
At least one, yeah.
This is number 12.
This is 12, right?
Oh.
So I've listened to 11.
Episode 12,
Yeah.
and you've listened to all 11.
Of them this morning.
Man,
no, I'm just kidding.
One of our biggest fans.
There you go.
That's right.
So we've got Luke on the show today, actually, because one of the areas we want to talk about in our discussion is life groups and the importance of life groups, and we're going to kind of get into that. Really what we're going to do is cover three particular areas of focus today. We're going to talk a little bit about the sermon from yesterday, and then life groups and spotlight that, and then talk about the upcoming sermon series. And so just want to kind of give you a quick update before we get into that. Don't forget we've talked a little bit on the show about pray for a player. We believe in the importance of prayer and the need for that and how we ought to be committing to that. And we have this initiative with Upward called Pray for a Player. And we've got a lot of kids in fact, over half of the kids in the Upward program this year do not indicate that they have any church that they belong to. And so we want many in our church engaging in sponsoring a player or a family and committing to pray for them and contact them and encourage them. We've found that to be very meaningful and effective last year in a few families that were really impacted by it in a dramatic way because somebody they didn't even know let them know they were just praying for them and how meaningful that was to them. So also, if you did not get a chance to listen to the sermon from yesterday, it is available now. You can find that in the link, description link to this video. Pastor Nick preached out of Philippians chapter 2 and just did a standalone sermon yesterday. A little bit complicated because we had snow come in like just during that 2 or 3 hour period in the morning where it made it necessary for us to cancel service and just come and do a live stream. And that went well, didn't it?
Very well. It was sarcastic. those who don't watch the video or are listening can't see the sarcasm that I put off.
Yes.
Because we recorded half of it.
80%,
and then it cut off, and so we had to do it all over again. So I told everybody I've never recorded a sermon 1.5 times.
Yep.
So it's pretty interesting, but it went well, I think.
Well, yeah.
I mean, you wrote the sermon for me.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the content was good. I don't know about the delivery, but no, just some incredible. We just had some difficulties yesterday, internet issues, computer issues, and some of that, and so it made it for a challenging sermon. Yeah, I mean, 80% of the way through, thinking, as you're preaching live, and then it just shuts down, and then we had to re-record the whole sermon. So a little challenging, but the content is out there now. You can find it on our website, lbcnow.org. Go to the sermons, look for that there. You could also just go to our YouTube channel and look up the sermon from yesterday and watch it. I know you'd be encouraged by it. Pastor Nick preached on Philippians chapter 2, verses 12 through 18, and I'll just read it real quick. Paul writing there says, "Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, so now, not only as in my presence, but much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure. Do all things without grumbling or questioning, or some would say grumbling, or what's another way of translating that?
Complaining.
Grumbling or complaining, that you may be blameless and innocent, children of God without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation." That doesn't seem applicable to today at all, does it?
Not at all, no.
Yeah. Anyway, so do everything without grumbling and complaining, so you can be blameless and innocent, children of God without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world, holding fast to the word of life, so that in the day of Christ Paul says, I may be proud that I did not run in vain or labor in vain, even if I am to be poured out as a drink offering upon the sacrificial offering of your faith, I am glad and rejoice with you all. Likewise, you also should be glad and rejoice with me. So that's a pretty powerful passage of Scripture, don't you think, Luke?
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy because there's a couple times during Pastor Nick's sermon yesterday where I could really see what he was saying and really picture a couple times in my life where complaining or grumbling or just dwelling on the negative circumstances surrounding those days can really kind of bring you down. And so I really think that you hit the nail on the head with that. And I mean, it's a powerful passage, but it was a really good sermon yesterday as well.
Yeah, that's such a practical point, especially today, because, I mean, it's really not hard today because there's not much negativity in the world, so it's not real hard to apply this. That's another use of sarcasm, I guess.
Yes.
But there's so much negativity, so much complaining. That's a very practical text of Scripture that just shows you the relevancy of the Word of God. And so I want to ask Nick, though, quickly, because I know with all the things we're trying to cover today, we won't have a lot of time, but I'll just in 1 minute, if you could kind of recap and summarize the sermon from yesterday.
Yeah. So the Apostle Paul, Philippians 2, he talks about the humility of Christ in the incarnation, and then he takes verse 12 and makes application to that and says, you are to live in obedience as Christ lived in obedience in verse 8, and he says, here's a couple things. And so I outlined it with kind of do not commands. In other words, do not do this so that you can obey. And he says, don't let up on your spiritual growth. Don't act up by complaining, and then don't give up on the Lord and His work in your life so that you can rejoice. And for me, the biggest point, I think just so practical, was number 2, just to, as you said, not to complain, not to grumble, not to dispute, in order to be a witness. That's the whole point Paul is saying there, in order to show that you're a child of God, but then to witness. And I think so many times we miss the point that when we complain and an unsaved world is watching us, we lose the opportunity to actually witness. And so to me, arguing on Facebook, arguing with a coworker, whatever, complain about my boss, complaining about...
You would never do that.
I'd never complain about my boss, but complain about other people in my life, that really the world's watching. And so to me, I just, that hit me the hardest. And we could spend so much time on there, but that is something to reflect on our own life. I think of, for example, a small example to me would be like if you go to a restaurant after a Sunday service, they say some of the worst people at a restaurant are the people who come from church. Literally, I've heard that personally from waitresses and waiters.
I've heard that too.
Yeah, and it's sad because you lose your testimony right there. And what's crazy is people who aren't even in that group that were complaining or whatever to the waitress, those Christians lose their testimony too because that Christian did that. And
guilty by association.
Yeah, guilty by association. And so that's just a small example to me as I was thinking about that we can treat people the right way and still be a witness to them. And so it does make us to sit back and reflect, okay, this argument I'm in or this moment I am in to complain, really let me step back and consider the people around me. And I think it will change the outcome.
Yeah, something I've said before a few times anyway is that the Christians that like what you're describing, I've always felt like there are some Christians who would influence people towards the gospel better if they would not tell anybody they're a Christian.
Yeah, literally.
Don't
say anything.
Evangelism by lying about you being a Christian because you live your life so poorly. Yeah. Don't do that. But I
think one thing too that you mentioned in your sermon yesterday that was really powerful, and I think a lot of times people who either listen to the sermon or either listen to this podcast to really sit back and take stock of is a lot of times you kind of made it a little humorous with the spiritual gift of negativity how you worded it in your sermon. And a lot of times I think people are so negative in their everyday life that they kind of forget that they're being negative. It's just kind of how they are.
Yeah.
And when you said, I think in your sermon, well, I'm not complaining. I'm just pointing out the problems. Okay, well, that you need to sit back and take stock of your life and just say, okay, well, if all you're doing is pointing out problems, then you're all you're doing is complaining.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people don't realize that there is no difference in pointing out problems. Or I just want to make sure that the pastoral staff is aware of these issues that's going on.
That never happens.
I just want to bring this to your attention. It's really just a Christian way of saying, I don't like this.
Yeah.
It's just another way of complaining.
Nobody, most of the time, 9 times out of 10, they don't have solutions.
No. It's
Yeah.
just, but that is the spiritual gift of negativity. Is
Yeah.
I'm just good at pointing out the problems, but not really helping with the solutions.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, and so let's take a couple questions just to dig a little deeper, because there's always things in sermons that you wish you could have added but didn't have time. So here's a chance to add a little bit. Anything you would like to add to yesterday's sermon that you weren't able to?
Yeah, I think the only thing, I was going to say that about complaining, but I think the only thing is the word work out there. In verse 12 where Paul says, work out your salvation, the idea actually is to continue all the way to the finish. So in other words, Paul was very specific and did that on purpose, used that word there to say, hey, I really want you in my absence to work as hard as you can to finish this process of becoming more and more like Christ. And so he did that on purpose. And so it's the same way with us, that we are to work as hard as we can to finish, and to think about, hey, what is the cost of not following Christ? You know, it's not what is the cost. I think so many people think, well, I got to do this, this, and this. But really, in reality, the cost of not following Christ is far greater than deciding to follow Christ. So I think that's the only thing. I wish I could have spent more time there, but we only have so many minutes, and I don't want to preach too long. So. Yeah,
I don't know anything about that.
No, long sermons.
The good news is that everybody's used to it. So
yeah. I mean, you don't want to come in. You don't get to preach much if you come up there with a 20-minute sermon.
That's
I'm
true.
not going to let you preach much if that's all you bring. Everybody want you even more than they do now.
But the work out there, I think, is an interesting word to even study for us to consider, because we forget that. We just think, okay, work out. But really, Paul is saying, no, work out, finish, work as hard as you can, like an athlete. And he uses the athletic kind of analogy throughout a lot of his writings, because it does make sense. It makes sense to us that, okay, they're going to work as hard as they can. And Paul says the same thing in your spiritual walk: work as hard as you can to live as Christ would live. So that's the only thing I would add.
Yep.
But anyway, so let's do this. Let's transition to life groups. So we got a good amount of time here just to discuss life groups. So Luke, we brought you on. You're a life group leader here, and you've been here a long time, actually.
Yeah.
How many years have you been at Lebanon?
So I'm 33 years old. So I've been at Lebanon for 33 years and 9 months.
3 years and 9.
So I've been going here my whole life. I grew up here. I really love the church.
Yeah.
So I take that back. I was away for about four and a half years. Went up to Liberty to do my college and study there.
What was your degree there again?
So we double majored in biblical studies and pastoral leadership. And so 4 years there, and then about 10 to 11 months, got married right out of college, lived up there right after, worked for the school, and then moved back to Greensboro. And once we moved back, kind of came back, got plugged in, and started teaching a life group then. So I've been teaching a life group for about 12 years.
Okay, that's
maybe
what I was going to ask
maybe a little bit less than that, but right there at it.
Yeah.
And so Nick, what about we talk about life groups, but what are life groups here at Lebanon?
So life groups are small gatherings that meet each Sunday morning before or after you attend a worship service. And so they take the corporate, what we call the corporate worship service, where we gather together as a body, and then we break in these smaller groups to discuss different aspects. And so, they're very important to us. In fact, that's like what we call the lifeblood here at Lebanon. And we encourage you that, if you're not in a small group, in a life group, it is really important that you get into one, because that's how you, develop relationships. You grow deeper in your relationship with the Lord. And so life groups are very, very important to us. That's one of the main things. In fact, that's kind of the next step you take here. So you kind of come on Sunday morning, and we're expecting you, if you come back, to get into a life group and not just to come on Sunday morning.
Yeah, it's in these life groups you can truly be known, held accountable, and encouraged in your spiritual journey.
Yeah, for sure, and develop those habits better that you preached on a few weeks ago. So you've taught 12 years as a life group leader. What made you want to become a life group leader?
So throughout college, just really getting plugged into different aspects of campus life, was able to be on student leadership there, really just developed a really strong heart for discipleship. I think a lot of times in our churches, in our families, whatever it is, we kind of put a heavier emphasis on evangelism, which don't hear me wrong, that is very important,
Yeah.
but we kind of neglect the discipleship aspect as well. And so, I really developed a heart for that throughout college, and really wanted to bring that back and kind of see that play out here at Lebanon, and just, really kind of pour into the life of other people, who can then pour into the life of other people, and just kind of make disciples that way. So when we moved back, we were much younger, and so we moved back. We didn't have any children, and so we actually started doing the college-aged life group is what we started in. Most of the people who were in the college-age life group are still in my small group. They're just now we're the young married couple class, and so we've kind of all transitioned into different phase of our life, but that's kind of where we started, and then we kind of transitioned once we started having children. It was just it's hard to stay out with college. I mean, college kids just want to stay out late. I mean, they want to do things, constantly be moving and active, and that's cool. It was just really hard with a 2-year-old and a newborn.
I can't imagine.
No. No.
There's a sarcasm again.
Yeah,
You have how many
lot.
children now?
So we have 4 kids. We have 3 boys and a little girl.
Yep.
Any more?
Negative.
None.
No. Yeah,
You
we're
done?
done.
Yeah.
Couple chickens, couple dogs.
Yeah. We got a big farm, or
Yeah.
not a big farm. We have a farm now. We got several chickens. Probably close to 30 chickens now.
Wow.
in various stages. We got a couple, 3 dogs, 2 cats, 2 goats, and a partridge in a
Got
pear
everything.
tree.
So no more college ministry is what
No,
you're saying.
college ministry is hard with all that.
But you talk about discipleship. I think that's great because that's I think the main focus of life groups is the discipleship. Evangelism is important. We do outreach here. That's one of our main things. But life groups help us accomplish the discipleship we want to see in the lives of the members. And so I hear that heart. So tell me, and you said you're leading the young couples now. What kind of, speaking to discipleship, what kind of study are you doing now? What are you leading those couples through?
Yeah, so actually, we just kind of transitioned back into a Sunday morning format. We were doing a home group for probably 3 to 4 years, meeting at our house on Thursday nights, and just especially with COVID coming, it just kind of really made it hard to have large groups at our house. And so, we met a couple times during COVID, and it just kind of became increasingly difficult. Plus, a lot of people in the small group keep having kids. And so I think the last time we met at our house, we had like 40 people there, and like 24 of them were kids.
That's
so,
awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it's great,
Yeah,
but
that's great.
it's tough. So Sunday morning just makes it a lot
you got
easier. We have childcare.
Childcare, yeah.
And we can really focus in on what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So we just kind of transitioned back into a Sunday morning format. And so what we started with was kind of defining marriage, how the Bible does. We started in Ephesians 5. We looked at our marriages as a picture of the gospel, not just a relationship between a man and a woman, not just how we interact with each other, but Paul, when he's writing, he talks about marriage, and he talks about the relationship between Christ and the bride, and he kind of uses that to equate the two. So we spent about 3 weeks talking about that, 2 to 3 weeks on that, and then now we're in a new series we just started, and we started, and then we've missed 2 weeks because of snow, and so
Demonically inspired weather
So
events.
whenever we meet again, we'll be talking about some topics that we usually hit on in premarital counseling. I'm sure you guys being pastors, y'all have either done some premarital counseling, or I know that you both sat through it before you got married. And so a lot of times when we have that counseling, we sit down and we kind of talk about what marriage is going to be like, or what we want marriage to be like. But most everybody that's in the group now has been married for at least 5 to 10 to even longer, and so it's really more than something that we kind of expect. We've kind of been living in it for a while. And so, we just wanted to revisit a lot of those topics. So, we're going to start talking about like expectations that you bring into marriage, how those kind of have played out in each other's marriages. We're going to talk about conflict resolution. We're going to talk about money. We're going to talk about sex. We're going to talk about raising children. And so, we're just going to have a lot of those topics that typically people talk about before marriage, and they kind of have these grand ideas, and then it's kind of like I think it's Mike Tyson that always says, everybody's got a plan till you get punched in the mouth. And that's kind of how marriage is sometimes. Not the punch in the mouth, but
if you're
like.
going to quote Mike Tyson, though, you got to say it the way he says it.
I'm good on that.
Pumped in the mouth.
But, everybody's got kind of this plan about their marriage of how they want it to be going into it. And then once you kind of get into it and you realize, oh man, like this is no longer the fairy tale that we thought it was. Marriage is hard. People always say, getting married is easy, but staying married's hard. Just like the Christian life, getting saved is pretty easy, but staying, and working out your salvation, like you talked about, that's really difficult. That's a lifelong process. And so the goal for the series is just to really equip us to have these conversations in our homes with our spouses about these other topics. And maybe we've gotten off track, maybe like it'll help us realize that, okay, when we started these things, we had these ideas. We wanted to be really spiritually focused. We wanted Christ to be at the center. And now that, we've been in it for 5, 10, 15 years, we kind of see how kind of far off track we've gotten. So hopefully this will kind of get some conversations going. And if any of our people are like that, it'll give them a jumping off place to kind of get back on track with where they envisioned their marriage being 5, 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's easy. Okay. We talked this morning in staff meeting about the importance of being intentional in your life. And I think at least where I'm at in our marriage, at our season, close to about the same as y'all and many of the ones in your group, it's easy around now to start coasting and just kind of floating together downstream, and it's very easy to lose that intentionality. And so you got to have others that that are going through it too, that can help you and can motivate you and spur you on to what, you say, hey, this is what we want to be when we got married. Yeah, good marriages don't happen by accident. It's not like you say, it's not like you can just coast down the river and at the end of it realize like, oh man, we had a great, Christ honoring relationship. Mm-hmm. It's something that takes work. It's something that takes, intentionality, just like you said.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's great, and so you lead that young married class 10:45 every Sunday morning.
Yep. So most of the people that are in our life group, they go to the early service, and then we go to the 10:45 hour for our life group, and we meet upstairs. So it's a really good time.
Yeah, and childcare is provided. How about this, Matt? You got some questions for him. Let's go ahead and jump into those. I know you had some to ask him about. Yeah,
we'll talk a little bit about commitment. One of the big pieces to being a covenant member at Lebanon Baptist Church is going through our Discover class. And in that Discover class, we tell you about the church and tell people interested in the church more about it. But we say, I always say, we're wanting you to, if you're going to be a part of this church, we want you to be committed. We don't want you to just show up, on Sunday morning, but be committed. And that first step of commitment is being a part of a life group. And then in these life groups, we really are wanting to help influence each other to be committed and to pursue commitment together, not just in your marriage, like in this particular, but in life in general. And so commitment is a big part of our church and what we ask for people to do. And we're trying to get life groups to take steps of commitment this year together to pursuing some of the mission. And so I'm just kind of curious, what would be some areas of commitment, like in y'all's life group, that you're kind of wanting to lead your group towards this year?
So there's a couple different areas that, you guys have challenged the church with and our life group, especially. I think that a lot of times, a lot of the work, and I think the statistic is like 80 or 90%, but 10% of your members do like 80 or 90% of the work. So our goal, one of our main goals is to really spread that out, is to get people more involved, to serve, not just attend a worship service, not just attend a life group, but to really get involved, plugged in, and serve. We have a lot of ministries here. We do Upward, we do our food pantry. We have stuff going on all week, with our after school and everything that we do. We have a ton of ministry. So, one thing really is to get more involved in the serving aspect, and not just rely on that 10%. But another area is to really be kind of evangelistically focused. I think the challenge that you guys have kind of put out is that each life group kind of really concentrate on seeing 5 people come to know the Lord throughout this year.
Yeah, and begin the discipleship process.
Right, into the church. Whether it's our church, whether it's a different church, see them kind of get involved in that. Yeah. And so, that's a really good focus for this year. That helps us stay on task with our, evangelistic focus.
What about future events, studies, areas you're looking to study with the life group this year? Any thoughts on that yet with your particular group?
Yeah. So I don't know if you do this on purpose or not, Pastor Matt, but I really enjoy teaching more exegetically. So, verse by verse, kind of going through a book of the Bible, topical lessons and series. It's a struggle for me. Because that's me trying to say I have to be smarter than what's in the Bible, right? Like I have to come up with all these things when I can just teach what the Bible says, and that's pretty good. So hopefully, after we kind of finish up our initial marriage series, we'll kind of get into possibly a book of the Bible, maybe one that kind of focuses more on marriage. I'm not going to say that we'll go through Song of Solomon or anything, but that could be a good one to go through.
You don't want to commit to that just yet.
I'm not going to commit to that right now at this time. No, but hopefully, we'll do kind of a topical series, and really the format that we're trying to go for is more of a discussion based. I kind of have a tendency just to kind of get up and teach and talk, and so I can get up there and talk for 30 minutes, and that kind of be it. But I really want to get a lot more focused in on everyone kind of sharing and sharing their experiences as well.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's good. And two, I think small groups or life groups, there's more than just a young married couples too. So if you're watching or listening to this, please know that we offer so many more. And we'll put the link in the show notes as well to look at all the life groups we offer, because it's not just, you don't have to be married to be in a life group. And so we want to encourage you to be in that. It's very important that you're in a life group. So thanks for sharing that. We always like to spotlight our life group leaders. Hey, Pastor Matt, we got a couple minutes here. Why don't you tell us this? So you're starting a new series in Acts this Sunday. Why don't you tell our listeners and viewers why Acts? Why did you choose a sermon series through Acts?
Well, I think because it's part of God's Word. I mean, you're talking about that. That's good. That's a good start. God wrote it. He wants us to hear it and to know it. But we really want to be focused on the gospel and on proclaiming the gospel and on being the kind of church that God would want us to be. And so there's really no other book like Acts in all of the Bible. It is one of these books that is completely unique. I mean, like Mark, well, you got Luke and you got Matthew and even some stuff redundant there with John. You got 4 Gospels. You got several repeated themes in some of the epistles that Paul writes. But Acts is the only book that gives us that 30-year period after Christ rose from the grave, ascended into heaven, and then they went out doing what he had commanded them to do. That first 30 years of the church beginning, that is the only record we have of those events. It is literally 3 decades that changed the entire world forever that we have been impacted by. And so I wanted us to look at that. It's a long book, but I want us to go through it. And we'll have some breaks, do a topical series maybe every now and then to just kind of break it up. But we will work through the whole book of Acts because it shows us what the early Christians did as they were being obedient, talking about the sermon from Sunday, but as they obeyed Christ, this Acts shows us that. And it's full of excitement. It moves.
Yeah.
There's all there's all kinds of things in the book that leave you going, whoa, what's that all about? What does that mean for me today? It's controversial as well because it's like, well, should we be doing that? I see them, hey, they're talking in tongues. I mean, should we be doing that today in the church? I mean, if the early, so do we do everything that the early Christians were doing? I mean, do we do some things? How do we know what to do that they did, and how do we know what not to do? What's descriptive? What's prescriptive? And then just just to see the explosive growth of the gospel as it went from this small little group that were deflated, defeated, and in hiding to thousands around the whole Roman Empire and known world that had put their faith and trust in Jesus and had turned the whole world upside down in just 30 years before technology and social media and all of that. So we want to study it and look at it because of that. There's all these experiences and examples of witnessing in the book. We're actually going to, Jesus says in Acts 1:8, you will be my witnesses. So he says, go out and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And then they go out and do that. And so we're gonna call the series iWitness. And it's just going to be a sermon series through the book of Acts, and we're going to focus on that. A lot of fun facts, a lot of things people don't know. And good thing we have Luke, kind of on the show today with us too, because Luke wrote Acts.
Yeah, it was a labor of love. It's a real labor of love.
Yeah, but it's Acts is the sequel to the Gospel of Luke.
Yeah,
and so it's just phenomenal to see that 27% of the New Testament written by him. I want to get into all of that kind of cool stuff in this sermon series. Yeah, so again, Acts covers those years from 30 to 60 AD, 3 decades that changed the world forever. Covers the reigns of Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero. Phenomenal book. Jesus said in the Gospels that it would be better for his disciples that he went away. So how is that even possible? Jesus said it will be better for you if I go away. That doesn't make any sense. And Acts shows us how it was better. How it was actually better that Jesus go away. So this is just an incredible book for us to jump in and study.
Yeah, I think that's great. Hey, is there anything you would just encourage our listeners and viewers to maybe do this week as they prepare for this sermon series coming on Sunday? What would you encourage them to do in order to prepare themselves?
So 3 things you can do to prepare for the upcoming sermon series on the book of Acts. Number 1, read the book of Acts, okay? Just read through the book of Acts. Now, number 2.
Before Sunday.
Before Sunday. Yeah, what do you mean before Sunday?
28 chapters.
Take 10 minutes, okay? Maybe 15. All right. Okay, maybe. Anyway, read. So number 1, read the book of Acts.
Okay.
Number 2, read the book of Acts. And then number 3, what do you think?
Read the book of Acts.
Read the book of Acts, man. And just read through it, and it'll fill your mind with all these questions, and you'll be excited to see what happened, and it will prepare you more than anything else. That will prepare you for the upcoming sermon series. If you're not going to read the whole book of Acts because you're a little weaker Christian, I understand. Read the first 8 chapters. Just read the first 8 chapters of Acts 2 or 3 times.
Hey, we'll start a reading plan too. We can find a reading plan for Acts that our church can jump in on. So I'll find that today and put in the show notes so that as they're watching this, they can just click on it and join.
Yeah, they can do that. And then even if they don't read it, they could still just click the checkbox so it looks to us
so
like
it looks
they did.
like they did it. Yeah. I mean, at least they can do that. Hey, as we close, Luke, since we have you on here, why don't you tell us, is there anything you want to add, like you want to see Pastor Matt preach on through the book of Acts?
Yeah, so, Pastor Matt already kind of said this, kind of a unique book. I mean, it's kind of, even teaching through it is really different than how you would approach another teaching topic. When I was at Liberty, I think I was talking to Nick, to you about this maybe a week or so ago, but my professor that I had for Acts, his name was Dr. Fowler. He was an Old Testament scholar, right? Like Hebrew, like you could read Hebrew, right? Like the ancient text. Old Testament stuff, that's kind of his thing. And he kind of, I'm not sure how, but I think he just kind of got wrangled into teaching in Acts class. But he had a super unique take on it because if we think about the people who were living during that time, and we think about, the Christians who had just come out of Judaism, when Christ was alive on earth, God had given the nation of Israel this religion for them to follow. And now Jesus is coming and he's kind of turning all this on its head. And so we kind of have this first generation Christian community who are coming out of an entirely different mindset, not just culturally. A lot of times when we think about people who were alive in the Bible, you think, oh, it's a different culture, it's a different time, and that's true. But I mean, these were even religious people who were devout. They were devout Jews, and so they followed the letter of the law, and they came out of that. But this is kind of them. This is kind of the story of the nation of Israel coming out of a whole way of life and changing the way that they kind of think about everything. And so when we think about that, it's just a really unique way to think about the book of Acts and the Christians involved with it. And I'm sure, Pastor Matt's a lot smarter than me. And so I'm sure he's kind of already thought about that, and that's going to be part of his series. But, I would like
that's
to hear.
That's what you'd add.
Yeah, that's kind of how I would.
That's phenomenal. That's a phenomenal way to look at it, too. And it makes me think of one other thing I wanted to add, which is just bringing all this kind of together. There is this scene in Acts chapter 6 where there's some grumbling and complaining within the early church about some practical needs not being met. And so the apostles met and formulated a plan and appointed some other men of certain qualifications to make sure those practical needs were met. and they all agreed with it. All those early Christians who were grumbling and complaining all agreed, okay, this is a good solution. And they did it. They carried it out. And then it says in that same little text there that in response to some of that, Jewish priests, priests of the synagogue, came to faith in Jesus Christ and began following the way. So you've got the hardest group, culturally speaking, the hardest group to reach would have been these priests whose whole life had been about the synagogue and the Old Testament way, the Judaistic way of thinking, and they're converted to Christ all because of a proper response to some practical issues that created grumbling and working it out the right way. And you see all of that happening there. And that's just one little section of about 7 verses in Acts 6. Yeah. That'll be, I'm ready to preach that one this week, but we got a ways to go before we even get there.
How hard would it be for me to come in to the offices one day and convince you two who have, studied for years and years, and this is what you do. How hard would it be for me to come in here and convince you that, the way that you've been doing it is no longer valid and that you need to do all these things differently now? That would be a really tough sell. I think at this point in history, in church history, I would be a heretic at that point. But, think about it from that standpoint. At that time, for those priests to come out of that'd be really difficult thing to accomplish.
And Acts shows us all of those things, so it's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Well, Luke, we appreciate you coming on today.
Glad guys, I really enjoyed the invite. Thank you guys for letting me come and talk. I love talking about God's word and our church. So it's a really good time to do. I really appreciate it.
I'm sure you'll be on soon again. So anyway, we appreciate that. Pastor Matt, appreciate the opportunity to discuss Acts, and looking forward to Sunday, 9:30 a.m. and 10:45 a.m. You'll start the new sermon series. You can also join us online at 9:30 a.m. as well if you can't join in person. As always, our podcast is sponsored by Lebanon Baptist Church here in Greensboro, North Carolina. To learn more about Lebanon, visit lbcnow.org and click on the Around the Table podcast app. Follow us. Make sure you rate us, review us, subscribe to us, do everything you can, right to promote Around the Table, because it's a great podcast.
It is.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway, jump on Pray for a Player as well. If you haven't done that as well, we'll provide the link in the show notes. That is all we have. So we hope that you have a great week.
Thanks for joining us for Around the Table,
a discussion all about the ministry and preaching of Lebanon Baptist Church.
If you would like to learn more about Lebanon Baptist Church, visit lbcnow.org. Make sure to follow Lebanon Baptist Church on Facebook and Instagram, as well as subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Google Play,
or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Thank you for listening.